All right, we'd like to welcome in our guest for today. You know him from WFAN. He started in 1993. This year, he will start his 35th year as the Fairfield Stags men's basketball play-by-play announcer. He is also behind the mic for the Tate George, one of the most famous calls in college basketball history. His name, some people call him Mr. Met. We know him as Bob Heussler. Bob, thanks for coming on the show today.
My pleasure, Bob. Glad to be with both you and Brett today.
Thanks, Bob. Welcome to the show.
So 35 years at Fairfield, huh? That's crazy.
Yeah, and even crazier is that it's not consecutive. I actually started with Fairfield back in the mid-'80s. Had to give it up for a year because I had two young children, and my wife asked me, hey, can you take a break from this because it involves some traveling? And I did, and then I eventually ended up doing the Yukon games, and I worked for that Connecticut Radio Network had the Yukon games at the time. They lost the rights, and so then that job disappears. That is how we ended up at the Fan, because I started looking for new radio work. That was 1993, FAN. Then I went back to Fairfield, and they can't get rid of me. I'm like the wallpaper now. They can't get me off the wall.
Well, you gotta love it. I mean, you must love it to be doing it that long. And I was actually, when I was doing my research, I was looking at the Fairfield. I didn't realize one of my favorite coaches, one of my favorite college basketball coaches, is Ed Cooley. Now, I'm a St. John's guy. I'm a St. John's fan. But Ed Cooley, I always think he gets the most out of his teams. I think he's one of the better coaches out there, and I think he's very underrated. I didn't even realize he started at Fairfield.
Oh, yeah. I can tell you, first of all, Bob, that Ed Cooley is as good a guy as he is a great basketball coach. And it was probably, in all the years I've been associated with Fairfield, that was clearly a masterstroke. It was the one thing they really got right. We're like the Mets, if you look at it, at Fairfield basketball historically, where you have those spectacular seasons, but then it's followed by a lot of frustration and sometimes mediocrity and some losing seasons. But Cooley, they got it right. And I talked to him, in fact, a couple of months ago after he won the Naismith Award, the coach, the national award.
Yeah, they had a great year this year.
Yeah, and you know what? We spoke for a long time, and Bob, I can tell you that he's the same Ed Cooley as he was back when he was a pretty humble first-year head coach. It was his first head coaching job, Fairfield, and just a wonderful guy. And I wish him and Providence nothing but
And he went right from there into Providence, and he's become one of the top. I mean, Providence is always they're always sneaky good kind of Providence. You don't expect them. He'll win a Big East tournament out of nowhere. But this year they made the run to the Sweet 16. But I was surprised. And I've always said it. I've even said it on this show a couple times. How much I think he's just an excellent coach. I think he gets the most out of his players, and like you said, he's a good. And it seemed to me, now I'm not going to pretend to be a Fairfield expert, but he seems to have kind of jump-started that program a little bit.
Well, he did. We had great years under him. The one thing we did not do, and still haven't done since 1997, was win a MAC championship. There's no reason to I wouldn't bore you with the details of what went wrong. Kind of, again, I use that comparison to the Mets. But we had a team in the 2010 season, 2010, 2011, that was the equivalent of, those teams were the equivalent of, say, the 06 Mets, and stumbled. But look, it wasn't because of Ed, it was circumstantial, and he was a hot property late in his Fairfield career. And he's a great story because he's a Providence native. This is a guy who literally came home to take that Providence job. He's an orphan. He literally grew up on the streets of Providence.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
I didn't know that.
Now you say the 2010, 2011. Yeah, I'm just looking at it here. You guys had a great. You lost only 3 conference games. You 25-8. Where did they lose? Where did they lose in the MAC tournament?
To get this, to St. Peter's.
There you go.
Yeah. So St. Peter's jumped there for got their start as an underdog against you guys.
It's amazing. St. Peter's is, I don't know how familiar you are with their campus, the program. What they just did, forget what they did by upsetting Fairfield that year, because even though it was a bad stumble, St. Peter's had a legitimately good team. They won the whole thing. They ended up beating us and then beating Iona for the championship. But what they just did is, in my estimation, on the short list of the most extraordinary college basketball stories of all.
I totally agree. I mean, their enrollment at the college is, I think only a couple thousand people.
Yeah. Oh, and they were great. I mean, they beat, when we came on the air right after they beat Kentucky in that opening round. But you know what I think it is? I think these teams, I think it could happen more, because when you got the one and dones, or they only play, they don't form as a team. There's also a big difference between an 18-year-old and a 21 and 22-year-old. Like, you have a lot of seniors on these teams, on these no-name teams, quote unquote no-name teams. It's a big difference between a 21-year-old and an 18-year-old kid. The 18-year-old kid might go to the NBA and be a star, but he's not there. And they've been playing together 3-4 years. They got a team dynamic.
There's no doubt. I always refer to that concept you're talking about, shared experience, and that counts for something.
Of course.
And when you've got guys who are in there for a year or two and they're out, there's no way you can build that continuity. And two things going for St. Peter's. You have some guys who have been together for a while, and they were unbelievably well coached and probably underrated as players. You end up at St. Peter's for a reason, because somebody's over-recruited you.
Yeah.
Right.
But, you're right. Kentucky, and they were getting better as the season moved along, but, they see St. Peter's in the first round, and before you know it, you're down 10, 12, 14, and then all of a sudden the alarm bell goes off. And
it's too late.
Too late, yeah.
Yeah. Not used to playing from down like that.
Yeah, either. Now let me ask you, because you made mention that you did the Yukon games for, what was it, 3-4 years, and then are you more famous around? Do you get recognized more as the Mike and the Mad Dog update guy, or as the Tate George, as your call for the Tate George shot?
Well, I would say that there's nothing that can replace the exposure you get, or I got in this particular case, with Mike and Chris. I worked at the Fan for about a month. I'm not going to say it was a probationary period, but when I went on the air in 1993, they were giving me shifts on weekends, for the most part, just to kind of get my feet wet and see if they liked me or not. And then I'll never forget it. I went on a shift where I was on with Mike and Chris for the first time in the summer of 1993. And even though people, and many in Connecticut, had started to hear me on the Fan, and the typical reaction, "Hey, I heard you on the Fan." Yeah. When I was on with Mike and Chris, it was like all of a sudden now I was really on the Fan.
Well, it was the only show around too.
Yeah, and that's what it is. It's just, it's like you're hitting right at the right time on the right show when everybody in New York's listening.
Yeah, Brett, that's a good point. And not only did I hit the right show, I hit that show as it was really peaking.
Oh yeah, I remember.
Because you had the mid '90s, and Bob, as a Rangers fan, 94.
That's it.
You had the Rangers were doing what they were about to do in '94. The Knicks were relevant every spring.
Yep.
The Yankees were beginning, 95. They had the Seattle series, and then 96, we know what happens. And then the Yankee dynasty comes into is born.
Bob, we don't need to talk about the Yankee dynasty.
Please.
Don't worry
Don't
about that.
We've all lived through that.
but here's how it plays into with me and Mike and Chris, because Mike identified me early on as a Yankee hater, and Chris loved it. So that kind of played into the dynamic. It was Chris and me with that silly crack committee. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah. Well, he's a Giants fan.
Right.
He hated the Yankees as much as you do, as much as me and you, all of us do.
Yeah, dog. Mike, he christened me and Chris the crack committee, and then Chris would have the bell, and the crack committee would come to order, and he'd hit the bell. And there were actually listeners who thought that the crack committee was for real, and they would They want a membership card.
Yeah, listen. Some people go overboard. Some people go overboard with that. They have that Mike Francesa Con thing going on with the Santa Con. Listen, I love the show. I listened every day, and I was devastated when they broke up and whatnot. Now, was it awkward coming in every 20 minutes when they hated each other those couple of years?
Well, there were days that everything was great. And I would say, guys, more often than not, it was good. But the problem is when they had their battles, it wasn't like, okay, you walked out the door and everything was forgotten. You came back to work the next day and, you pick it right back up. It tended to linger at times.
It's like any office in America.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. Awkward, no. You kind of just diffused it at times. I will tell you, and I think both Mike and Chris would attest to this. Certainly Chris would. There were times where there was a little bit of tension. You'd go in there, and Chris would tip me off ahead of time. He basically, in so many words, he would say, I'm going to bust in your balls here because I need to kind of lighten things up or get Mike involved. And it usually worked because what he would do is Chris would ambush me, and then Mike would also jump in. And now instead of Chris and Mike, it would be both of them, ganging up on me. Usually over the Mets.
Or over Fairfield. Right. They gave you a hard time over just like they gave Chris Carlin a hard time over Rutgers.
Yes. Oh, endless. You're right. It wasn't just particular to me. It was anybody who sat in that update chair.
Yeah, you're right.
Minko. Oh, my God.
Yeah, with his bingo, and they gave him a hard time about that. Oh, forget it. Dog was great. But what a lot of people say, a lot of people think Mike's a jerk. I bet Mike a bunch of times. I did the what was it? Not the fantasy. Was it the Fantasy Phenom where you tried out? Where they got I did that. I met him a couple times. He met my wife in line. Me and my wife were in line, and he started talking to my wife. He's like, "Are you trying out?" He's like, "I love it. You should go up there." And she's like, "No, I'm not doing it. But he's actually a nice guy.
Mike. I've said this to many people. And I'm not just saying it because this is how you've set it up. He's inside. He's a softie. He really is. I know. Look, and there are everything that can be written and said about Mike Francesa, and that side of his personality, which is angry and argumentative, and so on and so forth. We said it. It's been written. It's been said. But I've seen the other side many times. He can be as gracious as anybody as you've ever met, and Bob, you just attested to it by the story with your wife.
Yeah, and that's how it goes. That's how a lot of my wife gets mad at me about stuff I say on this podcast sometimes, and I'm like, oh, come on,
right?
I'm just entertaining. I'm just trying to entertain people.
But
that's funny.
That's part of what makes him great is that he's gonna say what's on his mind. It's gonna be how it is, and even if that's upsetting to certain people, but doesn't change that the guy is a good guy. He needed what he is a product of his own personality. He's the guy who, if you met him in a bar and he wasn't on the radio, he's going to argue with you if he disagrees, and he's going to come at you. He has a take, and sometimes it's controversial. Sometimes he'll say things that you look at him and what are you talking about? But the fact is, he has conviction. And he was able to communicate it well.
And it's cheap to buy him a Diet Coke's a lot cheaper than a beer.
That's a good deal.
I never thought of that. I could have saved some money on the Grey Goose.
But he doesn't need that. Now, real quick, one more thing on Mike. After I was watching your Tate George call, and afterwards, I saw a clip where they went to the studio, and it's Mike and Nance. I saw the CBS call of it was what I was watching after yours, and then they went to Mike and Nance, and they're in the studio, and they're babies. Mike looks like he's like 20-something years old, and they were like, Mike's like, it's not, the game's not over until the buzzer sounds, and like they redo it over and over, and you're like, how did we ever watch this stuff like this? Like now we're like picking apart. You see the replays with the neighborhood play in baseball. They can't even do that anymore. But I was laughing to myself with him and Nance in the studio.
Yeah, that's his guy. Jim Nance is, they go. Mike actually tried him out when Jim Nance was when they auditioned Nance. at CBS. Mike was the guy who kind of, put us in the ringer. They had a so-called dress rehearsal.
Now,
and,
go ahead. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I was
Go
going to
ahead.
say, to this day, Jim Nance will give Mike Francesa all kinds of credit for helping move his career in the direction it eventually went.
Yeah, and now who is some bet? Now for me, I love Breen, I think Gus Johnson, and I love Iron Eagle. Those are my three basketball guys. Who are your basketball? Like, who did you look up to growing up to? Who do you like now as far as play-by-play radio, television?
Yeah, well, Bob, that the basketball question is the easiest one you'll give me all day. It's Marv Albert.
I knew he was going to say that. I knew it.
Yeah, and it's not an exaggeration to say that he influenced hundreds, if not thousands, of broadcasters or wannabe broadcasters. Because listen, I'm an old guy now.
My father would give the same answer. My father would give the exact same answer, and so would Brett's father.
Of course.
Yeah, well, your father then can attest to what I'll tell you. Back then, radio was a huge part of the sports experience, and I mean, just understand that the game 7 of 1970, Knicks and Lakers, was not on live television.
Right. It's amazing, to me that people were able to watch, today, but back then it wasn't even the game that they were watching. You were just listening to someone else interpret what was there, and it really was up to the broadcaster to share that experience and give it to the listener.
We were at the very end of that because for me, I'm just like you. I loved radio. I went to school for radio, and then I became a correctional officer because that's what you do, right? And then I was the same way. I love listening to games. Me and my friends would listen to the Mets games on the radio sometimes because I didn't have Sports Channel. I actually didn't see Game 6, Rangers Devils, the guarantee. I didn't see that because I didn't have Sports Channel.
Yep.
Okay.
And it was carried on the local networks. And because it was the Devils or a local team, MSG didn't get the home games in Jersey. So I had to listen, and I had to listen to that. And oh man, I mean, forget it. That's one of the greatest player series I've ever seen still to this day. And listening to that and I was a radio guy myself. I had a little black and white TV, sometimes the antenna, I'd have to move the antenna. So I'm we're not that young, Bob. We're not that young.
Well, I'll tell you, here's how absurd it could get for, people like me who are into sports and into listening to sports on the radio. I had this little piece of junk, reel-to-reel tape recorder.
Yeah, I know.
And I would actually tape Marv Albert calling Knicks games, not because I was I was a kid. So not because I was an aspiring broadcaster, it's because I enjoyed listening to replays of Marv calling the games. Think about that. I mean, now you wake up and you look at your phone and you're seeing any highlight you want. Back then, I'm listening to radio replays, which just sounds absurd when you think about it. But the fact is, he was that compelling as a basketball play-by-play announcer on the radio, and certainly influenced me. And Mike Breen is the most notable example of somebody who would give you the same answer to his favorite.
Yeah, oh yeah. Mike Breen, he was the Knicks guy growing up, right?
Oh, yeah. Mike Breen was a huge Knicks guy growing up, a huge Marv Albert guy, and actually a pretty good basketball player himself. He is a self-described basketball junkie, and I know Mike casually. We've gotten together a few times and had some nice conversations about career paths, that kind of thing. And I can attest to the fact that he is a bona fide basketball junkie, a bona fide Knicks guy, and having played with him on the Fan 66ers.
Ah, the 66ers, yes, I remember those.
Yeah, we used to have a basketball team.
He's got some game, is that what you're telling us?
He does have some game. He's a point guard. He was pretty good. I tell you, we had some good players. Eddie Coleman could play basketball. Dave Jennings, the late Dave Jennings.
Yeah, the Giants punter. But he was a Giants punter. I mean, he was a professional athlete.
I'll tell you what, he could hoop, he could ball.
Now, now let me tell us a little bit about Steve Garrett.
You got.
You didn't think I did my research, huh? Did you?
I was just going to say you dug deep for that. Well, Bob, it's a long story, so I'll make it short.
Okay.
I worked for ESPN back before they were affiliated with New York, meaning I lived in Connecticut. In fact, guys, I lived 18 miles from at the time, not any longer, but at the time I lived only 18 miles door to door from ESPN in Bristol. And, you know, I used to commute from my town in Hamden, Connecticut, up near Quinnipiac University, to a story every day for the fans. So people would say, why do you go to New York and it's crazy commute every day? And the answer is because I love being at the fan. But I enjoyed doing, radio work. And so I did part-time work at ESPN Radio Network, national. But they then bought, in the early 2000s, a local New York affiliate. So now there's a conflict. And I'm being heard on 1050 ESPN Radio in New York, and I'm on the fan at the same time. And they're competitors now. So I asked if I could change. They asked if I could change my name, the fan.
Nice.
So Steve Garrett is my two sons' names are Steve and Gary. So the obvious choice there would have been go Gary Stevens, but there are two. There's a Gary Stevens, the famous jockey. And There's a famous Gary Stevens disc jockey. There was. So I said, all right. So I went with Steve Garrett, and a lot of people. In fact, I worked with Dan Patrick. He had a radio show on ESPN at the time, and he thought for sure there's a Hawaii 5-0 character, Steve Garrett. For sure.
I found the article, and I actually had to give. My cousin works at ESPN, and I emailed it to him, and I was like, "Is this real? Is this satire? Am I going to look like an idiot when I bring this up?
Great.
I will just confirm this, yes or no." And he goes, "Oh my God!" He goes, "I never even realized." He goes, "I didn't realize it was him." He goes, "I walked." He's talking about building 1 and building 2 in the hallway in between.
Yeah.
And he said, "I used to pass him every day and say hello to him."
Yeah,
that's so great. Some
I'll
people.
I'll tell you a quick story. I was there at the beginning of Mike and Mike. That's how long ago it was. But I was there like from day one. When I wasn't full time, but I would fill in on that show as the anchor. And there was a time one morning when the producer, his name is Justin Craig. In fact, I think he's now he was the program director at ESPN Local in New York for a long time. Good guy. He calls me in. He said, "You're not going to believe this phone call I just got." What had happened was somebody was listening in New York and called control and said, "That guy, I'm telling you, that guy who says he's Steve Garrett, I'm telling you, his real name is Bob Heussler. I know his voice. I know his voice. Don't let him try and pull. I don't know what he's trying to pull here. That's not any Steve."
You didn't throw a little accent or try and mix it up. It was just you. You didn't even try and hide.
Be an Australian guy or something on ESPN.
Yeah,
you could add a whole bunch of different gigs. You could have just signed up for everybody.
I'm not a good voice guy, but that might not have been a bad idea.
Does Mike McCann do? Mike McCann does the same thing now, right?
Mike has used. I don't know if Mike's done. Mike is he's like me. I should interject here with one other. I'm retired, but I'm going to continue to pick up a shift here and there. So I want to make sure people know.
I know.
If you love doing it, you're never really retired.
Don't worry, we didn't even get into the juicy stuff yet.
Yeah. But Mike's a long time radio guy, but I don't know if he ever tried to pull a Steve Garrett routine when he was working at the fan. But Mike has moved. He's up in New York State and enjoying the good life. Yeah,
all the old timers are going. Huh? Beningo's gone. You got Summers is gone. It's kind of like a changing of the guard there. They're going younger. It's a different feel to the station too.
Yeah, guys, but absolutely so many of that I'll call it the first generation or retired, semi-retired, or completely out. that's how it works. That's how it's supposed to be.
Well,
that's the way it goes.
It's kind of a shame because they're about to miss one of the greatest runs in Mets history.
Yeah, well, no. Brett just touched the money. Forget it. He touched the money.
I know. I always go with he mushed it.
But you know what? It's falling apart here, Bob. I mean, we're 6.5 up.
Yeah.
And I say the West Coast trips are where Mets seasons go to die. And
yeah, well, I think they're going to be fine. And a lot of people will say we're talking as before they played the Angels on Friday night. The Angels are playing. I know they just ended the 14-game streak, but they're playing terrible baseball. I like the fact that McGill is back tonight. Looking for good things from him. This season is. I'm actually, guys, as crazy as this sounds, I am glad the Braves are making a run at the Mets.
Yeah, you don't want to be 20 up.
This way we can end the narrative. And
please.
Everybody's going to start waiting for the collapse.
Because
on the record.
You hate now for my generation, our generation, me and Brett here, our most hated team is the Braves because we grew up in the
Braves.
90s. Mm-hmm. And we just every year, and then Chipper Jones naming his kid and this and the whole thing. I am so done with the Braves.
Yeah, well, mine is the Cubs.
Okay.
It's one of those, the first one is always the one that is with you forever in terms of, love or hate. I hate the Cubs. They really do. They were the first quote unquote rival because even when, 469 happened,
mm-hmm.
the Mets and Cubs were both horrible at the same time. They kind of ascended at the same time, and then of course 69 happened, and that sealed it for me. But there were other years. I mean, 84. The Cubs and the Mets.
Yep. And then that's right when the Mets were just starting to pick things up, and then 85. They got better, and then of course we all know what happened in 86. But that team could have won more than one. I mean, come on, 88 was a disappointment to the Dodgers. They got into drugs. They got into drugs and partying and this and that. So.
Yeah. But 85, that team won 98 games, which was, I think I read the other day, I like to pick up, I have a bunch of Mets books, a lot of older books based on, the history of the team or particular eras of the team. I think I read that 98 wins was the most for a National League team to not make the playoffs since the first year that the Mets were in existence.
It's amazing that can even happen because you think of all the teams that are so good that could have very easily won the World Series in any given year that, now, especially this season, would be, included into the playoffs, if not even more teams that probably wouldn't have a
Everybody
chance.
makes the playoffs this year.
Yeah.
12 teams.
Yeah.
And that's a big difference with how this race is going to unfold coming down the road with the trade deadline. More teams are going to be in it as the trade deadline approaches. Are they going to be willing to give up players if they're still in the race?
Yeah. I know. I'm somebody who I want Dom Smith out. I think the Mets should trade Dom Smith. I think it'd be the best thing for Dom Smith, and I think it would. And I think the Mets, they clearly need bullpen help.
What do you think his value is right now?
Well, obviously a lot's going to depend upon what he does at Syracuse. Mm-hmm. And what they do with him, they're going to bring him back up sort of as a showcase situation. I don't think you can do that unless circumstances dictate it, which unfortunately, might be the case. But, I'm knocking on wood as we speak that Alonso's going to be fine and it's a pain tolerance thing and he gets through that. I think Dom still does have some value. In fact, he does have some value. It's just a matter of, what organization thinks he's a good fit for them.
And do they have stuff for the Mets? Because we got to get something back.
You just said it. They're going to look to shore up that bullpen.
Yep.
But that's easier said than done.
Bullpens are terrible. All bullpens.
Look at the team they're playing tonight. Look at Aaron Luke, who basically there's nobody could hit him last year with the Mets. He's been okay with the Angels. But nothing like
we saw him and Syndergaard as crushing losses to us going over to the Angels earlier. And now, I'm not saying it won't turn out to be where they're going to perform, but it doesn't look so bad right now.
What do you think of Syndergaard asking out of the start against the Mets? Because that's what he did. Give me a break.
Yeah, I mean, they talk about extra rest. Well, the fact is he would have been on extra rest if he had pitched on Sunday.
It
would have been another day. You know what? It really ticks me off. And guys, I am not somebody who goes. The only thing I will ever boo a player for at a game is the obvious: lack of hustle. Somebody doesn't care. Somebody's just mailing it in. And there've been there are few. I don't boo, bad judgment, meaning an error or even a 3 strikeout game.
Did you go? Did you not go to any Mets games like in the mid '90s? Because that's all.
Well, you're right. There were, like a Vince Coleman. I'll boo him. But my point is, I'm not.
Him. They'll throw a firecracker at you.
Yeah, that's true. Look out. Or Brett Saberhagen with the bleach, right? I will say this though: the Angels will be at Citi Field next year because next year we have the balanced schedule, and every team is going to play every other team, and the Angels will be coming to New York. I am praying that A, Syndergaard pitches one of the games, and B, I'm at that game because I will unload my lungs. I mean, see, I don't, it's one thing to leave, take a contract, sign as a free agent, better your position. What he did was unforgivable because what he did was he played both ends of it. He figured, well, if the medical tests show that the elbow is not fully recovered, I'll take the $19 million from the Mets and basically do nothing. Or if it comes back clean, then I'll say I'll turn down the qualifying offer. I'll take $2 million more. The $21 million you got from the Angels. Get out of here.
That sounds like someone who's questioning themselves. Like you don't do that if you feel like healthy or 100% or really back to where you are.
Right. I couldn't agree more. And I don't know what's going on in his head. And listen, he gave us some great moments, but that left a bad taste in my mouth. And then what he's done subsequent to that.
Yeah, the video. We love you, New York. I love you. And then the no-hitter comment.
Oh,
take a walk. Take a walk, Syndergaard.
I loved what Max Scherzer said in response to that. You saw that?
No, what did he say? What did he say?
Oh, it's fantastic. Well, after Syndergaard tweeted out, "This is what a real no-hitter looks like," Max Scherzer tweeted at him, "If you're interested, he said, if you're interested, I'll show you what a real ring looks like." Wow. And then he said, "The closest you'll ever get to a ring is that dopey halo you wear on your cap."
Oh, wow!
I'm like,
that's pretty good.
The ring rope.
Now, real talk, because was Santana's a no hitter? Because it's so typical Mets that's how we got our first no hitter.
Yeah, it wasn't a hitter, and I'll tell you why. Even though I know the Beltran, if we had a replay, Beltran got a hit in that game. Who cares? Because you know how many great I'll just give you one double-figure one-hitters the Mets have had. Fantastic one-hitters, but the imperfect game. Seaver.
Yeah.
July 9th, was it 1969 with Jimmy Qualls? Come on.
Yeah. We were at Bobby Jones one hitter.
There you
go. In the playoffs
against the Giants. Yeah. Yep. One of the greatest games ever pitched by.
But how many no hitters were taken away or gone in the other direction from a call from an umpire?
Angel Hernandez.
It goes both directions.
Right.
Maybe not anymore, but it used to.
You know what? I take it, enjoy it. It counted.
It does.
Counted.
Yeah,
it doesn't count in an argument with a Yankee fan, though.
Oh,
listen, it's hard. It's hard, Bob. We grew up, and they get on us. They'll be like, I don't hate the Mets. I go, first of all, I want you to hate the Mets because I hate the Yankees. Okay,
right.
And I'll readily admit that it's mostly jealousy. Like if you had, I tell them, I go, if you had to grow up. And you had the Mets won 4 out of 5, and one of them they won on Yankee Stadium, and you had to listen to me and Brett. You would hate the Mets too.
Yeah. Listen, I understand the person who says that they're not real rivals because one's American League, one's the National League. I'll say there's nothing that could be further from the truth. These are two organizations that battle for eyeballs, they battle for the back pages, and they battle for fans. And there's no greater battle than any of that. And I also say, just look at the Mets uniform, okay? The orange is the New York Giants orange.
Yep.
The blue is the Brooklyn Dodgers blue. And my grandfather was a huge New York Giants fan, hated the Yankees for good reason, because they met in the World Series every once in a while, and they were city rivals. And the Dodgers, my father was a huge Brooklyn Dodgers fan. He's a lifelong Brooklyn native, as was my mother. I have Brooklyn blood, throughout me. And if you're a Brooklyn Dodgers fan, you hated the Yankees. So you inherit that if you're a National League fan, as I am. And as my dad said, I just happen to have taken it to a different level. That's just that's the reality of it.
Yeah.
I respect the Yankees in the sense that I have so many friends who are Yankees fans, and they're baseball fans. So we have that common denominator. We can talk baseball. But as far as the battle lines are concerned, you're in one camp or the other. The worst place you can be is, I like them both. If
a New York fan.
You're not a real fan.
No, when it's in your family, you're born that way, you're developed that way, and you'll grow like how much of a fan you become. But it separates. It develops, your friendships and all of that.
And I tell people, I didn't listen. I can't go back and forth. I think. What do you think? You think growing up I chose this life? You think I chose to be a Mets fan? This is not an easy life. This is not the easy road.
Well, I will say that both of my sons have encountered that. If I showed you my both of them, in fact, especially the junior high school age yearbooks, not as much in high school, but if I showed you some of their junior high school yearbooks, it would be, hey Steve, you're a great guy, but boy, your Mets suck. Hey Gary, I love you.
And we had no comeback.
Yeah, but I will say this in defense of being a lifelong Mets fan versus the whole Yankee jealousy thing. Don't bring it to this neighborhood, because I'm telling you, my first game, guys, I'll reveal again my age, was 1962. I went to the Polo Grounds with my dad.
Wow.
And so growing up in the 60s with Casey Stengel and watching the Mets develop, as bad as they were, also coincided with the decline of the Yankees, which began in 1964. 64 through the early 70s, really into the mid-70s, the Yankees stunk.
Yep.
And the Mets took the town over in 1969.
It's a different feel when the Mets are good.
I'm telling you, it is. And in 69, and so I lived through the Jets winning the World Super Bowl, the Knicks winning a world championship in basketball, and the Mets. And I'm telling you, of the three of them, the Mets lit it up more than anybody. And that's taking nothing away from the Jets, which was incredible because of Namath, and the Knicks either. Taking away nothing. But no team lit up the city. The only thing that compares, Bob, is the Rangers in '94. That's the only comparison I could come up with.
That's all I have.
In terms of and in 69, it was like that. And then in 73, the Mets should have won the damn World Series again. My point being that for the better part of my early Mets years, the Yankees stunk.
Yeah, they stunk.
And then in the 80s, when the Mets came back, the Mets owned New York. And the Yankees went the other way. And then you look at, the late 80s, early 90s for the Yankees, they stunk. Well, then, all right, so the late 90s happened. They happened, but okay.
Yeah, it happened.
But we developed that generation of Mets fans along the way,
but let me just say this to all the Yankee fans listening out there. We don't want your pity. We don't want it.
Correct. Take it I live in a condominium here, and I have a really nice next-door neighbor couple, and he is one of those, he likes the Yankees, and, kind of, I saw him the other day, and he said to me, we're talking baseball. He's not a big sports fan. He's not like you guys. He can talk it, but not really, he just casually follows it. And he said to me, I'm really happy for, you and the Mets. And I didn't say anything because he's not a, legitimate big-time sports fan. But if he were, I would have come back at him because
Right.
I would have said, "Don't ever take that tone.
Yeah,
Don't
no.
ever say, I'm happy for you." That's that's
Tell me
just
how good the
classic.
Yankees are.
Right.
Because they're better than the Mets right now. And I don't know if I could sit through another Mets Yankees Subway Series because I don't want to risk. I don't know if I can risk it.
Yeah, but how good is it for this town for them both to be good this summer and for both to be like on top?
Yeah, it once we make that turn into September and things start coming into focus as to how the playoffs might lie and what the potential is of both of these teams going far, it'll dominate the sports quote unquote narrative, and it's going to be fun. I go. You got to pretty much put me in a straitjacket when the Mets.
Oh, yeah.
You should have seen him at the game, Brett, when Plummer hit the home run.
Oh,
He was the happiest guy in the building.
I believe it.
I turned around and he's got both arms in the air waving. I was like,
That's the way it should be. It's the way it should feel. It hasn't felt like that in a long time around here.
But the Mets aren't terrible. The Mets have gone to the playoffs. They've done things. They haven't. They were terrible in the '90s, the mid '90s, and we're too young for the '86. We were only 5 years old, but they've gone to playoffs. They just break your heart, and the way they lose these games.
Well,
but they were always overachieving.
I look at this current regime thinking maybe they've got it right, and if they have, here's what we'll eventually end up with: sustained success.
Exactly.
Because what we've had over the years are those blips where you have those great seasons. You referred to it earlier, Bob. You're right. The '85 Mets, 98 wins, they went to the playoffs. It's spectacular, postseason '86. Even though we were, we were on a tightrope the entire time, and then, then it falls down. It fades away and it's gone. And then the '90s happen, and then you have the occasional like '99, 2000, or the '06 Mets, then the collapse, 15 and 16, and it's gone. So we need sustained success. So I'm hoping.
Who were the guys?
That
who were the guys we lock up? Like who you have the McNeils. I mean, we already talked about Dom Smith.
I'm a big McNeil guy.
Of course, you have Nimmo. You have Alonso, obviously, but it's going to be very difficult to give each one of these guys the contract and the money they want. And if you do, you're going to be sacrificing. Have you not
seen Steve Cohen's bank account? I guess I have PTSD from every other season I've ever watched or every other owner that I just don't. It doesn't feel real that it'll continue forever. I know he did it this year, but can he give every guy everything? Yeah.
No, he can't and he won't.
He's smart.
I know this sounds a little crazy, but I've read, and you guys have probably seen the same things. He is sensitive to the fact that if he were to spend like the drunken sailor, he's upsetting the apple cart. He's sensitive to the fact that there are other owners who can't do what he's willing to do. And so he'll, as crazy as it sounds, I'm sure there will be situations where he'll want to draw the line, or he'll do the smart thing. He'll let a guy like Billy Epler and the quote-unquote baseball people bring things to him the way that Hal Steinbrenner says he has Cashman bring things to him. And if Cashman is, strong in his conviction, it's green-lighted. Cohen will always give the green light if he's convinced that it's based in, on sound judgment. And I think that's why I say this current regime, which is more than just Steve Cohen, who has the tremendous resources, but it's Billy Epler and, Sandy Alderson to a lesser extent, and the baseball team. Let's see if they can get it right. And based on what Epler did this offseason, these are some pretty good decisions they've made. The guys they brought in, the Escobars, the Canas,
the Cano. Get rid of Cano. Cano would be on this team if it was the previous.
That's a great example of where, Steve, you benefit from the Steve Cohen. Or at the trade deadline, if you need to take on a big contract, well, maybe you do it, and because you have the resources. But you need good management just as much as you need deep pockets, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, that one of the best things I heard this year was when he said, "We're going to forget about the money. We're going to do what's best for the baseball team."
Yep.
Wait a Mets fan. That's all we wanted to hear forever. That's all we wanted to hear.
And that is something that has really, not been there since Maydol.
Yeah.
It hasn't been.
Well, we'll see. Hey, look, in all these little losing seasons, it's going to be that much better when we do win. Because we've never seen it. You've seen it.
Yeah.
We've never seen it.
Can't enjoy it. Nobody enjoys it more than Mets fans.
Yeah, I keep referring to my two sons because, as you might imagine, guys, they were Mets. In fact, they were both in Shea Stadium in utero. If you go on YouTube, you can see my late wife and me on Banner Day in 1984 with my son Stephen. She was 8 months pregnant, and we marched in Banner Day, and it's on YouTube because Kiner.
Oh, she must have loved that. She must have loved that.
She was.
Come on, we're going to Banner Day.
You know what? She was such a sport, and it was 95 degrees that day. They were playing the Cubs. I don't know how she held up. And it was like 3,000 banners that day, and our banner said "Future Met warming up in the bullpen."
Oh, that's great.
You
can't pass that up. Once you come up with that idea, she's got to go.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah,
That was so cool.
She was like queen for a day, waving to the fans.
That's funny.
And so Steve was born, and he's a Met fan. And Gary, my second son, was in utero. My wife and I were at Game 1 of 1986 World Series.
Oh, wow.
And that wasn't a good game.
It
turned out okay. She unfortunately wasn't with me at Game 6 and 7, but...
you were at Game 6 and 7?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, really? Wow.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, yeah.
I'm saying, oh, yeah, because...
Yeah. Well, we get it. You don't have to explain to us why you're saying it like that. We get it.
Yeah. I have I'll tell you a quick story about game. This is hand on my heart, true story. I was an upper deck box seat, left field. It plays into the story because I am literally staring at Kevin Mitchell standing on third, thinking, get him home somehow, and this game is tied, and we have a new life. And this is when they took out Schiraldi and brought in Bob Stanley.
Yep.
Now, Stanley, I knew he's been around a long time. I knew what kind of a pitch he threw, which was that heavy, that hard sinker. The ball that might end up
inside the
dirt.
left-handers. Yeah.
So I started screaming, and I mean, remember this is the 10th inning, so I've got a few in me theater, and I was feeling loud, and he comes in. I started yelling even before while he was warming up. I was yelling, "Wild pitch, just like this.
Wow.
Give me a wild pitch, and of course the at bat, the greatest at bat in Mets history happens, and the
rest is
the
history.
wild pitch happens, gets past Gedman, and there's a kid behind me, but a younger guy, and he stands up and he starts pounding me on the shoulder hard. He's like, "This effing guy called it! This effing guy called it! This effing..."
That sounds like your Tate George call.
Yeah.
The Huskies have won it. The Huskies have won it.
I think. Well, I didn't call anything. All I did was just hope for I wanted Mitchell to come in. I didn't care how he got in, and it was more Mookie Wilson than anything else because he had to do a nice hop, skip, and jump to get out of the way.
Parallel to the ground. That's a great story. That's a great story. Now I know you got to get going in a minute here, Bob, but I wanted to get one of our buddies. His name is Drew. He's a huge Yukon fan. He wanted me to ask you your top 5 Yukon Huskies of all time.
Oh, well, Scott Burrell's got to be number 1, only because he's a hometown guy. And Scott is, in my estimation, is the greatest athlete in the history of Connecticut. So Scott would be a personal favorite just because he's a good guy. Look, Ray Allen is probably the greatest Yukon Husky of all time. Rip Hamilton. It's right there. So let me give you 2 more. Those 2 are the obvious standouts as far as the greatest Huskies of all time, Allen and Hamilton. I'm going to go with Scott Burrell. Personal favorite of mine, Chris Smith.
Okay.
Another Connecticut guy. And boy, I'm up with 5 here.
What about what's his face? The guy that made the run. The guy that came out of nowhere. They won the championship. Why can't he was on the Knicks this year?
Who, Kemba?
Kemba.
You know, considering that, and I'm tossing all those names around in my head, considering that he single-handedly basically willed them to a championship, that is a great call. I have no argument with that.
They weren't even going into the tournament.
Right. Amazing. Just, I'm trying to think of anybody else in that category, but no, I would say that's a great call. So let's not even go any further than that. Kemba Walker.
I like it.
Yeah.
Drew will like
but
it.
Scott Burrell is my all-time favorite.
And I just had one more quick question. Now, when your significant other meets Howie Rose, does she talk to him about the Mets, or does she ask him about the Matteau call?
Oh, she is absolutely going to talk about the Matteau call.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Absolutely. And Howie is somebody who, if you get him going on the Mets, I don't need to tell you guys, then you better book at least a full day.
Yeah.
But
he does that on the radio. They almost can't go to commercial. He's telling these stories. He's going on, and he loves it. But I love it. He's great. He's great radio. He's great.
That's why it's so great to listen to. Exactly.
Howie's great. We are so lucky in that we have Howie Rose and Gary Cohen.
It's amazing.
And of course, that booth, Gary Keith and Ron is to die for.
The Mets have always had good booths. I like Gary Thorne.
That's why you could listen to the games when they were losing. It wasn't, other teams you can't even watch when they're winning because it's very painful to watch. But to listen to those guys and how knowledgeable they are and how much they really actually love the Mets and the sport, it's a pleasure.
But those two guys in particular, Howie and Gary, both Queens guys. And they do bleed the orange and blue, don't they?
Well, I think it was fate that I ended up buying those tickets. I don't know if those are your seats or not, Bob, but if they are, you come. You have a gun looking to get rid of some. You hand them this way.
They are actually. I picked a good year to retire.
Yeah, that's wild. I spent an arm and a leg for those tickets that day, and I had to get them because my buddy was sitting down there. And that's a whole other story. But I paid Rangers playoff ticket prices for those seats because it was a holiday weekend. But
I'm glad. I'm really glad I met that game.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
was a great game.
It was a great game, and this was great, Bob. Listen, if the Mets go to the playoffs, we're gonna need you back on.
I really enjoyed it, so you can definitely pencil me in advance. I'd be happy to join you guys.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much, Bob.
Thank
really
you, Bob.
great having you on.
Thank you for everything.
You bet. Keep up the good work. I obviously, what goes without saying, really respect what you guys do, both in your professional lives and with your avocation here. You're doing a great job. Great podcast.
Thank you, Bob.
Thanks so much, Bob.